and they're about as bad as my first book was. So I spent a lot of time working on writing, and now I've been fortunate. A few of my students just got their first books published, and I warned them. I said, because you, like they're all saying, all I want is ever just to see one book published. That'll make me happy for the rest of my life. And so that's how I felt. And then about 3 months later, you walk in the bookstore and you see Ian Rankin's got like a whole shelf. So I'm very fortunate. So I'll do a 2-second promo. My new book, and this is what's called an advanced reader's copy. It's called What We Buried. So this is the 7th book. So what I did in the very first book, I buried a mystery, which is that one of the two detectives, there's two main detectives. One is a Holocaust survivor's son, who's the only Jewish police officer on the homicide squad. And the other is a young lawyer whose brother was murdered mysteriously. And after a year, when no one could find out who killed his brother, he quits being a lawyer and becomes a cop. So that's kind of the underlying mystery in the book series. So for years, I kept getting people asking me, when are we going to find out who killed Daniel Kennicott's character in parents? The only problem was I had no idea. I kept saying, oh, you're going to find out, you're going to find out. So now the book started out, the first book, Old City Hall, really is kind of a courtroom drama. But as I've been writing, I've got a little bit tired of just, oh, there's a dead body, who did it? And the books, I think, have become more and more meaningful as I've written them. I've tried to make them that. So, third book is called Stray Bullets. You know, I grew up in Toronto, and my parents would be really mad at me if I locked the front door. And my mother would take my brother in a baby carriage and leave him on the street and go to the store. It was a very innocent place, Toronto. It was also exceedingly boring. When I tell my kids that we didn't have sliced pizza or sushi, anything like, you know, outdoor cafes. But I don't know if you remember, but in 2009, there was a horrible Boxing Day shooting of Jane Krieger was killed. Well, I'm a criminal lawyer, so I knew the lawyers, I knew the prosecutors, I knew the judges. And that actually happened right next to my office. So in a way, that was like a turning point, like the loss of innocence in the city. So that's kind of what this book is about. I want to go through all my books, but this book, Part of the City, in this book, I created outside Kensington Market, someone who's building a high rise. And that's interesting today, that we're going to start paying more taxes on real estate, because the reality in the city is that people, homeowners, aren't paying nearly enough real estate taxes. So young people living in high rises are being overtaxed. So, but it's all about, you know, the NIMBYism in Toronto, like don't ruin my neighborhood. Of course, there's always a dead body started. This book that I'm very proud of is called Downfall. This is the one I've got now. What I see in the city is a real division between rich and poor, more and more and more. When I grew up in the city, it was such a middle-class city. You didn't see fancy cars, but you didn't see people on the street with poverty. I remember once we went to Buffalo, I was like amazed to see slums, and then I remember going to New York and seeing there's money. Well, now, I think we all know how hard the city has become. So in this book, I invented the great thing about fiction is you can make stuff up, but you can tell the truth. The great line I always heard about, the great thing about fiction as opposed to nonfiction is counterintuitive, but in fiction, you can tell the truth. So people say, what do you mean? Well, if you thought about England during the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, Doug, what would you read? Tickets, right?
Yeah.
If you thought about the Dust Bowl in California, what would you read? Steinbeck. So, in other words, that's what I think a fiction writer can do is, so, and I really hate the term genre. I don't really think I'm writing a genre book. I'm just writing about the world as I see it. So in this book, a few years ago, I was invited out to a golf club out in the West End to do a book reading. And it was like walking into another world. It was like the 1950s. Everybody was rich, everybody was white, they all knew each other. It's like the beautiful enclave, beautiful man. And so what I did is I put a homeless encampment next to the next to the next to the golf club, and then someone starts killing homeless women. So I'm not going to read a lot, but I thought what I would do is just read the first paragraph of this book. And I could talk to you for 3 or 4 hours about the first word, the first sentence, first paragraph. But what I always try and establish is a number of things, 5 things: character, setting, action, tension, and voice is the voice of the character. And so after one paragraph, I think your own readers, people are either in or they're out. So quickly, I'll just read the first paragraph. Because the subways in Toronto didn't run early enough, Jemba Roshan had no choice but to ride his bicycle to work. His wife, Amal, was not pleased. In Canada, it is dark in November, and you don't even have a light, she said when he was getting dressed to leave. She was right, of course, but what else could he do? They needed to buy diapers for the twins, and the rent on their 1-bedroom apartment was due in a week. I promise that I will be careful, he told her as he was rushing out the door, but she refused to kiss him goodbye. In 7 years of marriage, she never done that before. So people are shaking their heads. So I wanted to either be in or out when I write the book. The new book of What We Buried, I've kind of morphed into something very exciting for me. In the town of Gubbio, which is a small town in central Italy, in 1944, the Italian partisans came and they killed a Nazi general and they injured another Nazi soldier. And 2 days later, Hitler demanded 40 Italian citizens be massacred. Actual event, and it happened June 24th, 1944. I plan to go back there for the 40th anniversary. So that's the backbone of this book. So this book is 3 different stories. It's actually quite different than my other books. It's not like a dead body in chapter 1, but it still has the same kind of theme. It's a theme. So to me, the books are really about characters. So 2-second promo. It's going to be out in February 27th. I'm having that just over at Innis College, where I went to university, having a book launch there. You're all invited to come to it. Have to sign my mailing list, and if you finally, I'll end up with this article I wrote the other day for Lawyers Magazine. I started by saying lawyers are always asking me, how do you do this? How do you write books? And true story, over Christmas, a friend took me out for dinner with this lawyer who just really energetic guy, just finished practicing, just retired. He says, I've got all these ideas for a book, which I'm sure you have, Doug. I'm sure you have. I've heard this hundreds of times. And he said, so like, what's the secret? What's the secret? So I looked at him and I said, 5 words. I said, what? I said, do you have a chair? And he kind of looked at me and goes, oh, yeah. I said, yeah, put your ass in the chair and get to work. Okay, I think that's what we're seeing. Does anyone have some questions? I could talk about 2 hours. So. Yeah.
You mentioned your first book.
Hello. Okay. You mentioned your first book, and you mentioned the first line of your first book. Do you remember that line?
I remember it very well. And I can tell you how I originally wrote it. The line is, I originally wrote, much to, let me just get this right. Okay, a first sentence, I think, should start in one direction, should have a symmetry, and should take you in a direction that you don't expect. And I think a really good first sentence should have internal tension. And it should have voice. Okay. So this is the first line. Much to the shock of his family, Mr. Singh rather enjoyed delivering newspapers. But when you hear much to shock his family, you don't think it's going to be that. Who would have thought Gurdu Singh? And I can read it to you. So I always try to do that. In the second book, it starts with even for our Arceli Okoye, it was too hot to sleep. And even just saying that one line, people, there's something in writing called show, don't tell. I never tell you that she's a nanny working for a rich guy, but you know that just from. So, but the trick in that sentence, what I can talk forever about, right? His voice, because much to shock his family, Mr. Singh rather enjoyed living in newspapers. So it's a word rather that, because I used the original way I wrote it, much to the shock of his family, much to the utter shock of his family, Mr. Singh liked delivering newspapers. That's what I wrote originally. So what I kept looking at what's wrong. So much to the other, the fourth word. I was thinking, he's a 74-year-old English gentleman from India, and he's very proper, great flannel pants. And so, he's kind of got that British accent. So I thought the word utter could fit him. But the problem was it came before his name. So you would have read it 4 words, and you would have thought, this is a really lousy writer. He's too many adjectives. He doesn't have the confident voice and character. I'm actually very serious about this.
Yeah.
So I took the word other out, and instead of saying like delivering the newspaper, it's rather enjoy delivering. And in the first paragraph, it's Tuesday next, and it's that type of language. So by putting it after his name, so instead of saying much to the utter shock of his family, Mr. Singh liked to live in the newspaper, kind of boring, but much to the shock of his family, Mr. Singh rather enjoyed the newspaper. And then my son and I were going out to Stratford one day talking about onomatopoeia, that's just kind of much to the shock of his family. It actually fits like, to be or not to be. It's like the rhythm. So I spent a lot of time thinking about the rhythm of the writing, and that's a lot of what I work on. A lot of the writing I get is very didactic, especially where verb, great to use similes. Writing's great. Yeah. I mean, I can read you. Sometimes when I have like an hour, I read the first paragraph of each book.
So you say that your books are you're thinking about character first, but of course, with the dead body, that you need some sort of plot and you need some sort of mystery. I take it. Right. So do you outline that? Do you have the ending before you start, or how do you?
That's one of the questions I always get asked. And my answer is I wish. I write the first line, and then I usually write the first paragraph a few hundred times in the first chapter, and then I honestly usually have no idea where I'm going. Now, what I've learned, because I don't have 10 years to write a book, is that when I get about a third of the way through, I try to figure out.
Then you start outlining.
I never outline. I never have to do that. Sometimes what I do is I take a big, huge piece of crystal board and I put different chapters, because I'm a very old-fashioned writer, because every chapter is from the point of view of just one character. And I never have 2 chapters from the same characters. And I have kind of rules that you would never know, but none of the main characters can disappear for more than 4 chapters, because I don't want readers to think, oh, whatever happened. Although this new book is very different. In this book, I did something very different, which is there's 3 different stories, and the third story is Larry Green's father, who's a Holocaust survivor, hates the word survivor, and he's very smart, very sarcastic, but he has a 20-year-old granddaughter. Try to keep very simple, who never knew she had a Jewish father in Toronto, and it's a very long story, but he says to her, okay, I'm gonna tell you what actually happened after the war. He has a big, long story about what he did after the war. And this is what I'm proposing now is I want to write a different series set in what's called the displaced persons camps. In Europe, there were 2 million displaced people in Europe from 1945 to 1948. There were 250,000 Jews who were in displaced persons camps, mostly in Germany, because that was what the safest place for them. They were not allowed into Canada, they were not allowed in the States, they were not allowed in Canada. So there was this extraordinary group of people who lost everything. My family was here in the 1880s. I'm not a Holocaust survivor, but most of my friends' families. One of my friends' mothers, who's now passed away, I asked her how she knew her husband. She said, oh, it was simple. I was in the hospital, he came in, he was good looking. I said, why don't we get married? She said, okay. A week later, they were married. I had the highest birth rate of any person in the world. So I have this one, I'm getting off. But that's why I have this idea. So now I'm obsessively reading a million books about that time period. One thing I do want to say is that my books are, and you can even see from what I've written, they're all set very much in Toronto. And I'm very determined to do that. Probably paying an economic cost for that because my books were set in New York. And most Canadian writers I see kind of Americanize their books, but I just refuse to do that. But eventually it pays off. I got an email the other day from someone that said, I live in California, I've never been east of the Mississippi, but when I read your books, I feel like I know the city. That's what I don't want to go on too long because I've already got it.
Do we have any last questions from the audience? Are we on YouTube? No, okay, but probably don't have any questions from YouTube because they were late. Okay, thank you so much. We have bookmarks here for you to come and pick up. Keep your place in your book, and they'll tell you all about what books Robert has for you to buy at your local independent bookstore. Thank you so much.
I don't believe in selling books because I want booksellers to. And I have a mailing list. I only send out one small funny page once a year. I don't tell anyone. So I'll tell you what, if anyone wants to sign up, I'd love if you could come to the book launch, February 25th. Can you just scan and send it to me?
Yeah. Absolutely. Sign this here. Nancy says she has a scanner, so we can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I gotta go. I've got a case tomorrow. So Thanks a lot. Great.
Thank you.
All right. So now that we are reaching the world with our very own Brockton Writer Series YouTube channel, which is now up and running, we need your help to get out there in YouTube land, to get our name out there, to show up in people's searches, to have our own personalized URL. So please get out your phones now if you want. If you want to be on your phone, now is the time. Or remember when you're at home to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. I say this every time, but like I have an 11-year-old, he watches all these gamer bros on YouTube and they're always like, smash that subscribe button. And so that's what I feel like every time I come up here. I'm like, yeah, like and subscribe, guys. Next up, Mario Wonder. That you get to turn into an elephant in Mario Wonder. I like that one, it's cute. So this is the time where we would usually pass the picture, and we can do that if in this day and age people do have cash that they would like to donate to us. We will take it that way, absolutely. If you do not, we have a PayPal. And we will, that's findable on all of our social medias and everything. But I have a big special announcement for you tonight about fundraising. Woo! Yeah, right, drum roll please. We are hosting an online auction, a silent auction on 30gauctions.com where you can bid for amazing stuff. So These will be essential funds for paying our readers and guest speakers, and for the hybrid technology that allows us to feature authors and reach audience from all across the country. So your money's going to good, important Brockton Waters things. And our items include books from Brockton Writer Series alumni like Jessica Westhead over there, woo! And Kathy Friedman and Wabtagoo Rice, and also for the writers in your life, coaching and writing courses from Firefly Creative Writing, coaching and editing services from Anuja Varghese and Farzana Doctor, courses, membership in the Forever Writers Club. So like this is all really amazing stuff for you if you're a writer. The auction will run until February 13th. So if you are not a writer, it's a great gift for your sweetheart, and books as well. So buy them for yourself, bid on them for yourself, bid on them for your lovers, for your friends, for your children. Support Brockton Writer Series. So the URL is just 32auctions.com/BWS2024. And we'll be sharing all of that on our social medias as well. So please keep an eye out, share it, retweet it, reskeet it, blue sky it, X it, share it around so that we can get those nice budget lines in our grant funds and improve our tech and pay authors for their work, pay them fairly for their work, right? That's what it's about. So now for the readers. For those of you watching online, please do write your Q&A questions into the chat as they occur to you, because there's a bit of a delay. So it helps get those questions to us if you just type in the chat right away as you think of them. And first up, we have Michael Marola, who has published close to 20 books of poetry and fiction. His novella, The Last News Vendor, won the 2020 Hamilton Literary Award for Fiction. A symposium on Michael's writing was held in Toronto on May 25th, 2023. He makes his home near Gananoque in the Thousand Islands area. Oh no, it's me. Run away. Run away. I don't like looking at that.
Am I up?
Oh, 1 second.
Can you hear me?
I am unmuting
Hello?
you. Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. Many thanks for the invitation to read tonight. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. The weather and COVID made it a little precarious. So I'm going to read a few poems from a collection that I'm working on right now, actually. Just 5 or 6 of the poems from there. Solitary walks at dusk. If but you could, you surely would channel Wordsworth, or more boldly, Marianne Moore, with her hens, dogs, and the occasional alligator. Fixed in place, silver nitrate images of cottages snugly wrapped in white powder blankets, lights like cold eyes blinking away strangers. Reach out to caress jagged edges of sun as they drop piece by piece behind the darkening pines. Or perhaps breathe in through frosted nostrils a mist rising over a lake that brings to mind a certain lady whose sad chant drifts from silent isle. Or closer to home, the soft swish of ghost canoes that continue on unbidden nightmares to carry stacks of dead furry animals for the necks of gentlefolk in the old country. Yet try as you might, none of these leave the least stain. Instead, as your boots crunch shardlings of ice and ears stand guard for a coyote's yelp, you find yourself squatting on a bar stool in an overpacked Martian tavern, caught in one of those defining moments that result from serious drinking. The question flashed on the whiteboard: who among the three at that bar, human, hologram, or android, has the greatest claim to the exercise of free will? All three lower their heads, baffled beneath a cone of silence. The one who can be both inside and out at the same time, the six-armed bartender declares, wiping a virtual counter while pouring a line of measured shots. Challenged as to its pedigree, it shrugs, slinging shape-shifting towel over shoulder. Just call me Shiva. I scribe poetry with whichever arm is open. Crazy, man. freely or part of your programming? The bartender shrugs again and begins to write, words appearing in the rusty air. When you stand on the bridge and see the moon below you, wrinkling in the silver bowl, it makes you want to reach out and stir reality a bit with a forked stick that could serve as a witching rod in reverse, lifting the water into the frigid night sky. It's time then to leave the wide road behind. The bramble trail calls out to you, pulls you into the forest's violet glow. Blind, you stumble forward through the suffocation of Venusian methane marshes, through the molten furnaces of single-faced mercury, through Callisto's ultra-frigid ice vents, through the pulsing eye of infinite stars. Blind, you emerge and find yourself back home, breathless, cocooned in a bed of red dust, under a lonely cloud, like a hippopotamus. Second one is called At a Distance. I don't know about you, really I don't, but do you some mornings rise from bed and see the world as cardboard, flattened and without depth? Do you sit at the breakfast table across from your partner and feel you're looking at a TV monitor? Do you get the urge to peek behind the person to whom you're talking to make sure it's just not a foam cutout held upright by a flat pad into which the feet have been inserted? When walking on the street, are you forced to fight your way through layer upon layer of what resembles strings or see-through curtains lowered in your path at random intervals and which vanish the moment you turn back? Does the paper, no, strike that. Does the computer screen upon which you're typing this poem exude more reality than the limbs of trees desperate to get your attention by slamming against just-in-time window panes? Do you undergo a melting sensation? Apologies to the film-thin Wicked Witch for having appropriated that image. Every time you strive to pin something down? Does the half profile of the man on the moon smile at you while trying to steal your shadow? Are you afraid that the next time you blink, it will all disappear and you will be left without even a tiny pebble on which to stand? The fill-in-the-blank pool. I'm standing at the edge of a tidal pool, at the edge of volcanic rock, battered by a sea's deceptively gentle waves, and trying to think of something to say. Perhaps something that rhymes with importance. Stance, chance, enhance, dance, romance, faire de lance. Nope, I can't quite get it right. Irony circles like a vulture, and that's nothing to sneeze at. The laughter that squeezes through every available gap in the spaces between tides sounds too much like the holes in your logic. So now that you've gone out as far as you can on the shaky limb, shall we get back to what was troubling us in the first place? Or has the laughter turned manic, like a distorted bat signal, warning of a danger that doesn't exist? Is that a grimace I see reflected in the water, wavering as usual? What exactly do you hope to find there? The meanings of corners that can't be defined? The brightness heading towards you with an intensity you can't deflect? The worry of picking at your own flesh in the hopes that will come clear if someone else is shining the light, that reflected light? Like swimmers' legs in a foreshadowing between smoke-filled air and sun-drenched water that turns them into clownish sitcom stars. Ah, so this was a deep pool after all, pulsing back and forth from an ocean that couldn't give a shit about your logic, your tangents, your diversionary tactics. It reaches in and gets right to the point. I give the salt and I take away the salt. So dive in. The pool shimmers, the moon glimmers, and the tide waits for no one. This far country road. When last I trod this far country highway in summer's mosquito heat, the deer flies chomping at the bit bite amid a world of green blood pulsing through the heart of things, and golden apples vying to be declared the most tart, it lay encircled, practically tail in mouth, on shimmering asphalt, holding itself together on the roadside, a mirage of silver and brown scales, proud of its tubular dimensions, a portrait of stillness, like a series of chevrons laid out in the noonday sun. And now The wind scouring the earth clean in a swirl of leaves and plastic bottles, the sun so low on the horizon, one wonders how it can rise again, and only the rattle of loose windows left to mimic a natural sound. The hope stirs in a cold chest that last summer's mirage is found snug in its burrow, pulsing with warm dreams, and that, come the tickle of melting snow, it will once more rise, make its way towards that man-made surface, and enfold itself in an effort to embrace the world as one. Pleased with yourself for such a conceit, and preparing for even loftier ones, only then do I notice the swerve of remnant tire marks, and at my feet, the circular imprint in the macadam. This one's called Relationships. Asking for a friend. So what exactly is a relationship? Is it a ship for two or a few, carrying you out into an ocean that lacks horizons, just bobbing along with a heart full of song? Let us stop there to curtail any extended metaphor. Does it entail worship, hero or otherwise, aristocratic emotions that lift you beyond the ordinary, allow the peasants to rise above the muck? Friendship, hardship, ionship, positive, free-flowing current, reserved for the hip, for those who shoot from the lip unthinking, and relations. Relations, can they join in the fun, be part of the definition? I'm guessing why not, as long as you keep it above the first cousin threshold. How about age gaps and such? Is there a cutoff point when pierced by time's arrow that says, stop here, or risk a lonely upper end to things, a withering display of bony crags? Better yet, can forever tolerate such bonding? Or does Tithonus await to, quote, wither slowly in thine arms? Can elation ever be more than spur or spurt of the moment, a gush and a flush? Can it last past the part with the fireworks? And to get back to the non-extended metaphor, the ship ocean, any idea what that sinking feeling is all about? Asked for a friend. And this is the last poem. This is actually the title of the working title of the collection, and it's called Anhedonia. What is this country where my stony selves struggle to grasp their own shadows? When I first step ashore, why does Albert Camus come to the fore? Should I let this pale rhyme conceal a lack of reason, dry-eyed before Maman's last journey, or calculating the bullet's trajectory on that beach, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in quick succession? No, look more closely. It's a Mr. K carrying the 20th century on his back, with no emotional string theories attached. Even the flat face of the landscape probes no deeper than a series of diversions to keep the danger of quicksand at bay. And the only eruption comes from a machine that stitches pain to flesh. No, wrong again. I would be angry if anger were an emotion, were an option, mad if madness still showed the way. We have traveled beyond singing mice and dogged investigations to where a stoic tree, stripped bare limbs like signposts for no future, inhales the lashes of a world gone numb, where the nameless daily expect a Turing test to prove they exist. Or is it just me? I shrug and wait. For what? For the hope of a flood to lift me above the scaffolding I've invented to keep life at bay. For electric sparks to jolt me awake at last. For neurons to jump those gaps that left behind by a lack of what? Conjunctions? To leap from fissure to fissure, pulling the selves into one. Thank you for listening.
All right, so now it is time for our next reader, another Zoom reader. So we have Camille Hernandez Ramdoir, who is an author, scholar, and independent consultant. Her debut collection of short stories, Sweet as Sugar, was published by Rare Machines and Dundurn Press in 2023. She is currently working on a novel of historical fiction and magical realism spanning multiple continents and eras. Camille divides her time between Toronto and Trinidad, so she's probably a lot warmer than the rest of us right now. Everyone, please welcome Camille.
Hi, am I on?
Yes.
Okay, I'm seeing the audience, which is nice. So it looks like I'm actually performing it right in front of you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. I want to thank the Brockton Writers Series for inviting me. I'm going to read from my collection, Sweet as Sugar, and I'm going to read maybe one, maybe two of the vignettes from this. It's a story that is made up of 5 vignettes, and much of the book talks about the history of colonialism and Caribbean people. And so this particular story talks a lot about the way in which sugar literally transformed us genetically. So the sweetness of lies. The Arcatia had promised them so much. It was such a long time ago that Old Ma and Old Pa, cane cutters in the Brecon Castle estate in Caroni, could not even remember all the lies he had lied to them. When they arrived in Trinidad, they were sent to the plantation and the hard work began. The swinging, slashing, and chopping, hot sun, rain, blisters on hands, swinging, slashing, chopping, dust choking, muscles aching, your wielding arm feeling like it would come out of its socket, the cutlass feeling like it was now part of your anatomy, slashing, chopping, cutting. Then the beatings, the threats. A wooden, rotting road dwelling with no privacy and no air. They later learned the Creole people had lived there before them under slavery. The soot and smoke of cooking fires and overseer's eyes passing over Ma's backside too much, and Pa looking to kill. And the cane, the endless cane that went on for miles, undulating in the breeze, then at once mocking you on the tepid, breezeless days of the dry season, days that burned into your skin and your eyes and made you feel to dead. During the rainy season, the canes hid all kinds of dangers, hookworms, snakes, scorpions, even the tiny day mosquitoes that were relentless. At first, Ma had wondered how long they would have to stay in this place, if there was any way out of this indentureship contract they had unwittingly put their thumbprints to, if they would really be able to get back on a ship and return to India, rich and whole, ready for a better life, as the Arcatia had intimated, after this nightmare was over. But now, as she looked out at the dark, vast sea of cane, black now, silhouetted by the pale blue and marine twilight sky, the majestic silver clouds, after a long day of being swallowed up in those same fields, and after sharing out the modest evening meal for Pa and herself, Ma knew they would never cross that Kalapani again, that Black Sea. They were here now. They had to make a life of it. Long before Old Ma and Old Pa and thousands of others like them arrived in Trinidad, a French Creole named Saint Hilaire Begorat brought the succulent, fortuitous yellow sugar cane to the isle and set himself up as lord amongst his African slaves. For kicks, he would hold court in a limestone cave overlooking the Diego Martin Valley, and like a pharaoh, insist they compose kaisos, bragging about what a demon he was. What a terror, an evil satanic entity. His slaves knew this to be true, knew that for any insurrection they could be tortured or even killed. In these same caves, hot red blood splashing on white walls, an indelible stain. Begarat promised them freedom if they sang his praises. He promised he would leave something for them after he died, land, a ring, gold coins. The same people who hewed the forests of Diego Martin, who uprooted rocks and stumps, who broke up hard land to make it cultivatable, who planted the sweet, sweet cane to enrich Begarat, in the end were freed by the Slave Emancipation Act and not by some crazed French Creole. So, as free human beings, they left his sugar plantation, knowing there was no sweetness in the lie. There was nothing to be had there, not with that Beelzebub and his megalomania. Begarat's former slaves were not alone. All over Trinidad, all over the English-speaking Caribbean, newly freed peoples were vacating the plantations, moving off into hills and valleys, anywhere they could start a new life away from the horrors of the whip, the rape, the torture, the insanity, and the endless lies. The planters, desperate to maintain their lavish lifestyles and the twisted hold they had on these considered subhuman, begged the colonial office in London to recruit Indians as replacement slaves. But the colonial office said, no, we can no longer enslave peoples. It is now considered abhorrent. However, they suggested, let us find another way. They resurrected the system of indentureship, which had served them well before African enslavement. But this time, instead of their own starving British peasants, it was to be coolies, dusty and emaciated, traveling by the hundreds, by the thousands, to the depot in Calcutta to listen to the Arcatia spin lies, sweet lies, lies that could almost fill a hollow stomach. They were so tempting, lies to swallow and stave off hunger that had become indelible. Put your thumb here, the Arcatia indicated where on a piece of parchment. Then they boarded the ships. That first lie, spoken back in the mother country, was sweet because it promised escape from poverty, from death, from famine. The second lie, that the work was easy, that one was harder to swallow. Yes, there was food, there were rations, there was some meager pay that got swallowed up by the elephant of the company store on the estate, which through the mechanism of credit kept one in perpetual debt. And this debt was compounded by additional debts, endless debts that kept piling up due to any infraction, insubordination, being caught off the plantation without a pass, deception. The work was crushing, backbreaking, limb-burning, relentless, merciless. The third lie, that you could really go back home one day to see your village again, your Mai, Babu, Didi, Bai. But instead, this green and yellow monster had you chained. Day in, day out, sun up, sundown, rain, cloud, wind, hoe, dig, plant, manure, weed, cut, burn, crush, boil, heave, tote, carry, fling, suck. Amidst this bitterness, you could consume sweetness every day, suck the cane you had cultivated, the cane that kept you subjugated. Sometimes that cane was all you had to consume. You buried your children in the cane field. This one died from malaria, that one from dysentery, a next one from malnutrition. The sweet smell of rotting flesh mixed with the smell of ripe cane. You believed the lie that said only 5 years. Then return passage. You asked to go back. They said another 5 years. You lied to yourself saying, it is my dharma. And then I'll read the last vignette from the story, The Sweetness of Oblivion. Jack had a good life. He had a good job with the government in the tax division, and this allowed him to afford the nice 4-bedroom house in a nice suburban enclave not too far from town. His pretty wife also had a career. She worked as an administrator in the healthcare system, and their 2 children were both doing well in school. But one day, Jack fell down, whoops, at work. His coworkers rushed to his aid. Are you all right? Should we call an ambulance? But Jack shook it off. He felt fine until it happened again and again. Then one day he fell down at home. Jack had a grand mal seizure in front of his children. He peed and shit himself. His wife, having seen these type of seizures before in her profession, knew what to do. She ended up calling the ambulance, and Jack was admitted to hospital for observation and a series of tests. Inconclusive. Jack tried to go back to work and act like everything was normal, but he was very worried. His wife, too, would lay awake at night, wondering what they were going to do. It got to the point where Jack had to take a sick leave from his work because his spells were increasing in frequency. The doctors in Trinidad suspected he might have a form of multiple sclerosis, but they weren't certain. There was talk of Lyme disease. They started giving him a cocktail of drugs, hoping that somehow this roulette would achieve a perfect storm of success in Jack's body. For a while, it looked like he might be improving, but then the seizures would start up again. He was hospitalized a second time. Jack had a family member in Miami. The family member offered to assist with medical bills so that Jack could come up to the States and get properly tested. He went, hopeful. At the end of it, finally, a diagnosis, neurosarcoidosis. The prognosis was grim, incurable. They could try to manage symptoms with drugs, but there were drugs that came with a lot of side effects. Jack went back to Trinidad, depressed. He had told his wife the news over the phone, but he didn't know how to tell his children. They were so young. Once he was back home, he began to Google everything he could find on neurosarcoidosis. Symptoms may include delirium, vertigo, confusion, hearing loss, dementia, vision problems, loss of sight, loss of taste and smell, seizures, fatigue. His heart sank. He clicked on treatment. No cure. Medication to reduce the inflammation in the brain. Some studies had shown diet could play a factor. Sugar had been known to trigger symptoms. He shared this information with his wife. She went through the house, meticulously ridding it of all sugar. Demerara, refined, icing, golden, cubed. Cookies, pastries, waffles, donuts, biscuits, chocolate, cereals were next. Ice cream, tossed. Hard candies in a bowl, eliminated. Syrup, jam, spreads, honey, trashed. It was hard at first to live without sugar. The kids were especially upset, but Jack's wife made sure to take them out to Haagen-Dazs at least once a week for a treat, without Jack knowing. She told them Daddy was on a diet, so he couldn't eat sugar, and they were not to let him know that they had eaten some. Months passed, no episodes. Jack returned to work. The next seizure that Jack had lasted for 3 days. He couldn't speak or recognize anyone afterward. He was in diapers and restraints. His wife began to let close family know in case they wanted to say their goodbyes. No one knew what was going to happen next. Weeks later, Jack was back at home convalescing. He had regained some of his faculties. He knew who everyone was. He had recouped speech, but he could not recollect his time in the hospital. One evening after dinner, Jack's wife found him rummaging in the freezer. Where's the ice cream? We don't have any. Remember, we got rid of it when we learned sugar is bad for you. I want ice cream. Well, we don't have any. What the fuck is this? I can't have any ice cream in my own fucking house? Jack grabbed the car keys from the table. Before his wife could stop him, he was in the driveway, getting into his car. You can't drive. You just came out of hospital. Jack slammed the door viciously in his wife's face and peeled out of the driveway. He did not come back for 2 hours. And so it began. No matter what Jack's wife did, plead, beg, cry, scream, cuss, shout, Jack was determined to eat ice cream and cookies and chocolates. He craved sugar more than anything. She took to hiding his car keys. He took to recruiting people to bring him his fix. Even his children pleaded with him to stop eating sugar. He told them they were scornful, hideous little brats who should have never been born. One night, Jack's wife woke up in the middle of the night to see that Jack was not in the bed. She feared the worst. Not in the bathroom, not at the bottom of the stairs. Where was he? She found him naked outside in the driveway, wielding a cutlass, slashing the night air as if he were cutting cane. Thank you.
Wow, that was great. All right, you're in for a treat now. We've got an in-person guest, and next we have Shakoy Hibbert, aka Need Some Koi. She is an art practitioner, a 3-time author, spoken word activist, and movement instructor. Through performance, facilitation, and community engagement, she possesses a remarkable ability to transcend experiences of power and pain through the mediums of poetry, dance, and speech. With a wealth of experiences to share, everyone needs some koi in their life.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful intro, and thank you for having me in this space. So my name is Shakoy, aka Need Some Koi, and I want to know if you're feeling good. Can I hear you say yeah, yeah? Yeah, yeah. Excellent, love that. So I write about power and pain because I realize that I go through a lot of pain. How can I actually turn it around and make it something better than what it is? So a lot of my work is from the themes of anger, grief, and anxiety, because these are my favorite emotions. It's like I chose them. And I really found a way to work through them. So with this first piece, I'm going to share from my book here. It's titled We Rise. And I wrote it because The Little Mermaid came out and I was like, you know what? Wow, we can be anything. Anybody can be anything that they want. And I wanted to pay honor towards that. So my first piece here is titled We Rise. When was the last time you opened your wings underwater? When was the last time you let your mind be free? When was the last time you smiled because you didn't have to remember to breathe? Life gives and takes, but it's the choices you make that give you the power to fly underwater. To the kings, queens, extraordinaries, femmes, queers, and non-binaries now, it may feel like you are drowning, to dive upwards like a rocket into the blue skies of the unknown, but what is known is that Black is beauty, trendsetter, go-getter, and now we made mermaids even better, because we rise. And then next, I wanted to take us on a journey to the back of the book where I have some bonus pieces. And with this, I was really thinking about my body and just thankful about the way that it functions. And I wanted to remind everyone to really take the time to ask yourself, you know, like, how does my heart feel? If my heart could speak, what would it say? How do my feet feel? If they could speak, how would they say? So I kind of did a body scan and allowed my body to speak. So this piece is titled Body Whispers. If my heart could whisper, it would say, you are whole. Whole like first seeing an A+ on your report card. Whole like being hugged by rays of sun after fleeing the cold whispers of air conditioning. Whole like a working well in the dire daily dryness of an unrisky life. Whole. If my stomach could whisper, it would say, dinner's ready. Hot seasoned lentils, it would remind me that feeling truly full is in fact just a state of mind. May my dinner be served as disruption. Chicken to leave me unafraid. Ground beef to keep my inner dilemmas grounded. And some lamb so I dare not be sheep. My knuckles would thank me for no longer using them to speak to walls. They'd remind me that, like me, they may seem rock hard, but even a knucklehead can be internally cloud soft. My ears would thank me for teaching them how to visualize and for leaking the conversations between them. My knees would say, oh gosh. My feet would remind me that being bare can help bear the soul and that toe size doesn't equal importance. My feet would whisper that stomping on glass ceilings is also what boots were made for, and that the seasonal walks through depression were meant to bring me through the peaks and valleys of my mountainous thoughts. If my lips could talk, they would spill the stories of kissing people's hearts, and then they would thank you for listening. If my heart could whisper. And so one of the reasons why I write, what brought me to say, you know what, I think I want to document this life, is because at the age of 19, my mom passed away from cancer. And that really made me have to contemplate a lot. And that's where I was able to feel that, yes, I was angry, but behind my anger, there was more. There was depression, there was anxiety, and my writing allowed me to be in all these different type of emotions and still come back around to myself and smile. So one thing I love to do is share stories about my mom and my parents through my writing, because I feel like they never got the chance to, so I really want to make sure that I make the most of the chances that I have on this beautiful planet. So this piece here is titled Leaving Home, because we find like we have so much security in our homes, but what about when our homes kind of shift on us and they change, but we still have to acknowledge them as a home? So this piece is titled Leaving Home. I want to write about home and how it can have so many shapes but stand in one place. How it can feel so good to be there and sometimes so bad. How you sometimes have to find peace in the walls of broken pieces. Or like when someone leaves the home and the home starts to act as if it is no longer one. When did you get a personality? How did you change shape but stay in place right in front of my face? Like it did not help raise you, watch you get your hair braided too, and watch your parent not make it home. We put a lock on the door, but you still let cancer come and live here in our home. Did you not understand the assignment? Do you not understand that the roof is for covering the space and the doors? The doors are supposed to stay locked until the family or the oldest sibling in the house says it's okay to come in. Home. I should have known I couldn't trust you. I mean, you nearly asked for blood just to be rented. You flood and destroy the bricks that were cemented. Not only did you house another family before us, I bet you treated them like you had their backs too. But even after I leave you, you'll be filled by another, even after all of our memories. So home, how could I feel at home with you? And so now that I've been able to unpack my favorite emotions, I'd like to share a piece that I wrote directly to anxiety, because one thing that I realized you can do with writing is you can create different worlds, and in those worlds, you can always win the battle as long as you're the writer. So keep writing. And I want to encourage everyone out there to get a journal, because a journal is really what allowed me to find out about myself, release my doubts, and step out. That's the tagline. That's the tagline. Yeah, so this piece is titled Message to My Anxiety. Message to my anxiety. You secretly inspire me. Singing loud like the choir's key, you're trying to be the higher key. You're focused on me like hocus pocus. Then I bloom on you like a lotus. You're like winter weather, but I'm a flower. With your storming ice and snow, you freeze my power. I'm being blunt to break the ice since you're calling in my head like lice. Things are known, lice to dice. Being comfortable costs a price. I want to be the cashier again, fighting you back with the strokes of my pen. Anxiety, if you had a title, it would be my least favorite idol. See, you were built like me, but you are not like me. I break free from the walls of anxiety. Anxiety, you're more of a shapeshifter than an uplifter. I see you on road, I see you in pictures, moving ice cold to catch your next victim. Invisible trauma, do you really exist? Invisible trauma got me biting my lip. Invisible trauma, but don't look at her wrists. Mental metal, when you can't just think to get better. All on my throat like a turtleneck sweater. I'm tired of self-sabotage. Anxiety, feeling like an inside job. Anxiety, not killing me softly, but quietly. Like a twisted spirit guide, inside of me you like to hide. But today I have a message. I'ma look at you like a blessing. Like you and I equals progression. Like you and I down the aisle, but we're grocery shopping, so I gotta force you to smile. See, I won't crush or sit on you, but I'ma have to belittle you. I gotta stay bigger, boo. Think of it as it's not me, it's you. Think of it as something spiritual. I was made from the powerful. Anxiety, only now I really see. Anxiety, you are powerless without me. Anxiety, I'm the landlord and I'm taking back my key. I'm moving your butt to the basement. And don't come back unless you're ready to be complacent. And this last piece that I'm going to end with. Oh no, this is the, I
You
won't.
can, you can take it out. Oh, it's fine. Yeah.
And so as you have known, I love to write. And with this piece, again, I love changing narratives and just making up things that don't really make sense, but in the end, somehow they do with my writing. So this piece here is about being a Black rose and the elements of Black roses and what that means to me. And yes, so I'm gonna start, it starts with a little bit of a song. Black, black roses in my garden. My black so imposing, they see it as a warning. Warning. The following information may be seen as false due to our Instagram policy guidelines. Guidelines. You see, they say that there is no such thing as a black rose. They say that any rose that even comes close in color is nothing but an imitation, a Kardashian rose. I know, how could they think we wouldn't notice? But I'm supposed to believe that black roses aren't real? Is a pigeon not just a black dove? Are my black pupils not just dark brown? Did Rosa not rise up by sitting down? See, I say the black rose erode, but they told us that they never growed. Maybe blacks rose where they used to throw stones. Like when Marianne Shaw created the Colored Women's Progressive Franchise in the 1800s for Black women to be able to invest in stocks and bonds. Or when she became the first woman ever, not just the first Black, to own and operate her own publishing company. Speaking of first Black, they need to add first Black in white history. Since they tried to deroot us by burning our growing fields, robbing us of our lineages, but the Blacks still rose. Black women, I mean Black roses, like Kathleen K. Livingstone coined the term visible minority, and that was in the 1940s. Not only was she a leading actress, but a true guide, making sure there were scholarships accessible for Black students. Talk about claiming where the money resides. Then let's talk about another Black rose, the Black rose that birthed me, the black rose that rose from the land of sun, wood, and water, a Jamaican black rose, one that came to Canada and rose 4 kids on her own, worked a 9 to 5 to keep the home that she owned. A seed planted so deep that I became a homeowner at the age of 19 when her petals were put to eternal sleep. See, the blacks have been rose. Blacks rose through parks, blacks rose through generations, blacks continue to raise the Martins and the Malcolms. So if you hear someone say there's no such thing as a black rose, ask them who the planter is. We have to know our history to yes our future. I spoke of the blacks that have been rose for the culture. This is an ode to all the black roses that weren't given enough water to grow, but still pushed through that concrete. You still grew. Your legacies pushed through. I speak of Black Canadian roses in hopes of one day being considered one too. And peace. Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. I dropped the microphone. Okay, lastly, we have our final reader tonight, who's also on Zoom. We have Phoebe Barton, who is a queer trans science fiction writer. Her short fiction has appeared in Analog, Lightspeed, and Kaleidotrope, and her story, The Mathematics of Fairyland, won the Aurora Award for Best Short Story in 2022. She lives with her family, a robot, and multiple typewriters in Hamilton, Ontario, and you can find her online at phoebebartonsf.com. Welcome, Phoebe.
Hi, thanks. And I hope everyone can hear me. So I'll just if you can't hear me, wave, I guess. But I'm going to be reading from a story called A Billion Miles from What Was Home, which was originally published here in this anthology, This Side of the Divide, New Lore of the American West. The first time I saw you, you were crying for the dead city. The rover's thick windows and air conditioning kept it at arm's length for the tourists, but I could taste its grit and blood on my tongue. All dead cities taste the same, hubris and disbelief and abandonment. It's only in the dying that they're any different, and tasting that once was enough for my lifetime. I noticed because you were the only one crying. The other 26 people in the tour group stared outside, took photos, and talked about how amazing it all was, the same way people acted at Mycenae or Tranquility Base. You were acting like this was more than a place, like it was personal, even though it had been sand choked for 2 centuries, like you'd walked these streets yourself when they'd been full of life. They're not a vampire, Wiseacre said when I mentioned it to him later, while he curled atop a shoulder he considered as much his as mine. Don't even think about it. Of course they weren't. It was the middle of the day. I gave his head a good scritch. His sapience didn't override his catness. Too weird, though. It's not like there's no more casinos. Who gets teary-eyed about that? A really dedicated gambler? Or maybe just someone who never heard the world always wins in the end? I thought it was the house that always won. I'd like to live in that world. Wiseacre purred, and it made me feel a little better, even if I winced from my word's sour residue. They tasted like a freshly dead city, like batteries gone bad, like a rotten garden. Maybe that's what you tasted too. At least the sand let Las Vegas hide its shame. It's easy to find cities built on myths. They're the ones that aren't cities anymore. From the shattered domes of Marsopolis to the sunken wreckage of Libertalia and the tourist-trapped echoes of piratical Port Royal, they only endure as examples or as warnings. Las Vegas, I think, is both. It's what happens when your myths tell you the future will be the present endlessly renewed, that you don't have to think about consequences, that your debts will never have to be paid, that the house would never win. The city's old spine was preserved like a trophy, with 3 kilometers of cracked asphalt and real money casinos freeze-dried under a steel and diamond sky for the tourists. I moved through it carefully, as if one wrong step was enough to shatter the illusion. Only the palm trees, stubbornly reaching, hinted at nature. The rest was a facsimile, maintained by people from well-founded towns in kinder patches of desert. Only true believers and lost souls still lived outside among Vegas's bones. I envied them that, here on Earth with its plentiful air and Aegis sky, when a city's skin split, there were still ways to survive. You'd think capitalism never fell with all this, Wiseacre said, still clamped onto my shoulder. Around us, the preserved strips, neon signs, and LEDs and holograms shouted to catch our attention, our approval, our avarice. It's what it is, I said. It takes a while for the echoes to settle. The bottled strip ended where it had always begun, with a bright, gleaming, unmissable sign of stars and bulbs and rounded corners that welcomed a visitor to fabulous Las Vegas, and that was where I saw you for the second time. You were kneeling next to it like a knight supplicating before a king, and as I watched, you set down 3 flowers on the grass next to it, blue and white and red. When you stood, you carried yourself not like a ground pounder, but a fellow habitat dweller braced against centrifugal spin. When you saluted the sign, I tasted the sourness of a myth overtold to rotting, and I knew you had to be from Yorktown. It had been a long time since red and white and blue were the colors of Las Vegas, and few havers cared about lines drawn in shifting sand. Yorktowners, though, they define themselves by those colors the way some people define themselves by one particular grandmother's grandmother's grandmother. I wanted to ask you why, then, but Wiseacre knew me well enough to dig his claws into me, enough to remind, not to hurt, and he was right to do it. As much as I'd come looking for stories, I didn't have any right to yours. As long as I kept my distance, you could be a reminder that some myths endure, despite it all. Those colors had made the myth that built Las Vegas, and by the time Las Vegas had fallen, they'd been bleached to bones. Boulder Dam was a work any haber could respect. Here, in an increasingly harsh environment on a world that encouraged laxity and drift, concrete flanks and spinning innards built when spaceflight was an impossible dream had been maintained in working trim for 3.5 centuries. It was why I'd come to Las Vegas at all, to breathe its air, touch its walls, and be reminded that collapse was always a choice, never an inevitability. I needed to understand it so I could help others understand it. You've got the water, right? Wiseacre sounded almost hopeful that he'd catch me in a mistake, that I'd have to go back and try again another day. It was no wonder he'd picked that name for himself. Only because you didn't let me leave without it. I patted the flask that hung from my hip. The water inside was mixed from the ice of Saturn's 7 great moons. It had never been sweat, a river, or rain. Offering it to the desert was how I would ask for enlightenment and forgiveness. Just making sure it didn't disappear on the way over, Wiseacre purred. I heard people tend to lose things in Las Vegas. Now have fun in there. I've got stuff to do out here. There was little trace of desert heat inside Boulder Dam's turbine hall. I wondered how many people looked at the gleaming generators and polished walls and saw the commitment and endurance that had saved them from rust and ruin. A few large flags hung from the ceiling, but where older photos showed the striped and star-flecked banner of the United States of America, the colors of the 4 deserts confederacy were unfurled there now. How many people aside from you cried over the end of that myth? Even the dam's name had been changed long ago, to strip one more unearned honor from an imperialist colonizer. Would you, I wondered, salute the ghost of Herbert Hoover? At least I was at peace inside the turbine hall. It reflected the boxed-in world I'd grown up with, without that vast and daunting sky, and felt like hallowed ground. How many generations of technicians had worked here, changing out worn components for fresh and cleaning away grime, so that millions of people they'd never meet could live another day. I stayed there as long as I could, basking in its example, until they ushered us back under the sky. That was when I saw you for the 3rd time, leaning against the walkway's chest-high wall and facing the lake behind the dam, as Wiseacre ran up and leaped onto my shoulder. Our friend's been busy. Given the choice between looking at turbines and being the center of attention outside, it was no wonder Wiseacre hadn't gone down into the dam with me, screaming at the sky by those green angel things like someone was dead. People were taking pictures. I tried to calm things down, but one cat can only do so much. I winced. The 2 sculpted angel sentries that guarded the western entrance to the dam flanked a towering flagpole that flew the 4 deserts' colors now. Was that blasphemy for a Yorktowner, a knife in the heart, or both? The idea of gawkers only made it worse. Hey everyone, the echo said. Come look at the ridiculous haber. I figured you were having a hard time, gazing down at the long fall to the water below, and I couldn't stand back and watch it happen. Habers have to look out for each other, to keep ourselves and our worlds from falling apart. That goes double on Earth. Hey, I said, are you okay? And I think I will leave it at that. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. That was excellent. It was great to hear you read. So we're going to have a Q&A now with all of our readers, with our 3 online and our 1 in person. So Shakira, you can come on up. So if you're online watching from YouTube, you can provide your questions in the comments. And if you're here in person, please raise your hand and Dorianne will come over with the microphone and you can ask your question to any of the readers here tonight. And please just note that we only read questions both online and will answer questions in person that are respectful of our authors and their work, and also that don't promote any sort of oppression. Thank you so much.
Questions. Nope, okay, all right.
Hello, thank you to everyone for your wonderful performances. I wanted to ask a question of all of the authors. What do you do when the words aren't coming? I'm a writer as well, and I recently had a period of about a year and a half where I didn't write anything new, and I didn't freak out. I just sort of was like, okay, this is the time in between when I'm just taking in the world, and I kept reassuring myself, but I kept missing it. And I recently wrote a new short story, so I'm really excited. But I'm curious about how you all deal with that sort of in between, sort of quote unquote non-productive time. And I don't think we need to be productive all the time by any stretch, but yeah, just how do you reassure yourself? What do you do in the meantime? Yeah, thank you.
Who's gonna offer to answer first?
I can go first.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, so it really does, for me, it really does depend from day to day, from month to month, because I've been in one of those fallow periods myself. And like you said, recognizing that don't have to be productive all the time is important, but there is still like basically ways to looking for creative ways to keep the engine running, even if it's just like noting down concepts, like or like scribbling a couple of words on an index card, or figuring out different directions to approach something. See if you can sneak up on yourself for a new direction. Like I have a typewriter over here in the background, and I've tried using typewriters to get it even just outlining and getting my ideas roughly on a page in a different way than I'm used to, kind of hoping that coming from that way will let me slip in under what's keeping me down and just demonstrate to myself that I still have the ability, because so much of it is just reminding myself that it's been a hard 4 years, but I can still do this.
Thank you, Phoebe. Shakoy, Camille? Oh, yeah.
Yes, I can go next. So, as somebody who started writing based off emotions that I didn't really want to feel, I had to find a way to write when I was actually happy. And I found that that happened doing a few things. One of them was going online through Eventbrite and finding different writing workshops all over the world. So I was in UK virtually, and it just felt really great to be around different type of writers and hear their flow. And that made me feel like, okay, like, especially if my writing can translate across the world online, then that made me feel like maybe I should write a bit more. And then secondly, is I like to spend a lot of time in nature, especially like watching the water. I feel like if anyone watches the water long enough, a story will come from just that motion and just like realizing like, wow, this is happening all the time, even if I'm somewhere else. So definitely nature and putting myself in different places.
Thank you so much. Camille, Michael, one of you?
Sorry, was that me that you called out? I find it difficult not to write. So it's not a problem for me. And I think one of the tricks that I use is I go back over material that I've written in the past and that I don't feel that like, okay, they could use more work. So I go back and I look at that and I change a few words and that. But I also do a lot of editing for other people. So that gives me ideas, and sometimes I have to be concerned about that because are they my ideas or am I getting them from somebody else? But I'm also, my partner and I are the publishers for Guernica Editions, and so a lot of our time is taken evaluating other people's manuscripts, poetry, fiction, whatever. So in other words, I get concerned about not writing at about 3 a.m. in the morning. That's when I might wake up, my eyes will fly open and say, I haven't written something in the last 10 minutes, here I go. No, but seriously, I mean, as a writer, you're going to have fallow periods. It's not something that you should be concerned about, and it'll come. One of my tricks is that I think a writer has to have a vision, and that vision is like a skeleton or something that you can hang everything on. You can hang all your work on that vision, and each one of the pieces that you write will be different, but it will have that vision in it. So if you have that vision and you keep that, even when you're not writing, you're thinking about writing and you're thinking about ways of making that vision go forward. So that's all I can offer.
Thank you so much. Camille, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, I went through a long period of not writing, and people that know my story know that because I talk about it all the time. I was in academia, and academia just shut down that creative part of my brain for a very long time. So now I'm kind of like what Michael's saying. I can't stop writing. I just have to get it all out. But I think if you're in a space where maybe it's not flowing, journaling, writing down dreams, listening for the voices, like just, like anything that pops in your head. You're washing the dishes and you hear something, you hear a phrase, what Koi's talking about, being in nature. I would love to try Phoebe's idea of like using different technology. That is so interesting. I unfortunately got rid of my typewriters, but I like that idea of, wow, like, will a different voice come out of this different technology, right? And yeah, we work on, most of us anyway, I would think, work on, a laptop or a computer or something, maybe a phone. Get back on the pen and paper, just do some like fluid writing, just whatever crap, don't think about it, just write. But also I think you need to respect, which I can't see the person who asked the question, but respect the process. You seem to understand that this is the fallow time, so let happen what needs to happen. And then when it's time to do the actual writing, it should come.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I haven't written a word for like a month because Christmas happened. Like, what? What was that? I feel like I was hit by a bus. Any other questions? Any further questions from YouTube, Jen? No? Any other questions? Questions? Okay. Because I will ask. If nobody else, I don't want to like overtake things. I'm like, I'm the host. I can ask whatever I want. If nobody else is, this is going to be like boring probably because it's just something that I'm like kind of obsessed with. And every time that people read, I'm like, this, which is like place and a sense of location, right? So when Phoebe was reading, I'm like, oh, like dystopian Las Vegas. That's like Blade Runner 2049. That's a place. I can feel it. And, and obviously Trinidad and Tobago, and Koi was talking about being in water, and that's like a physical place as well. So I was wondering how you approach place, be it in the describing of your writing or like where you physically need to be in order to write. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. Okay. Camille, do you write both places? You write Trinidad and Tobago, Toronto? Doesn't matter where you are?
I write much better in Trinidad, I have to say. I'm just a happier person here. My spirit is very happy being here. And I think that's because of nature, because you're surrounded by nature all the time. but I'm a person that needs a certain amount of silence, I would say, to write, because a lot of what I write is I'm hearing it in my head, right? I'm hearing voices. I see Coy's nodding her head. I know, like, it's like there's this group of us, like it's just flowing through us. We're just the scribes, you know. And if there's too much distraction, if there's a television, or someone's even playing their music too loud, or people talking, having a conversation, it's going to distract me from what I need to hear. I need the silence to hear what I'm going to write, right? So I know that was part of your question. I'm not sure I understand the other part. Is it about
Writing location, like writing of places, describing places, getting that, but I wanted to leave it open to either, to the writing of place or to the being in place.
Yeah,
So-
I'll just say something quickly about that, if you don't mind. This is I just finished the first draft of the manuscript for my novel, and a lot of places, a lot through time and space, right? And for me, I really wanted people to be able to smell, feel, hear the place. So if it was some place that I personally have never been, I was researching like crazy. Like, what are the birds? What are the seasons? What festivals might be happening, like anything that would help place people there in terms of 5 and maybe 6 senses.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else wants to address that, or if we just want to.
No, I can try. Just to follow up on what Camille said, when I'm writing places, it can be difficult a lot of times when I'm writing about places that don't exist, because I have to, there's a lot of stuff I'm completely unfamiliar with. And so I do perceive that there are a lot of things I'm not intentionally, but are not necessarily getting into the writing, just because I don't have a perfect grasp on that myself. Whereas when I do have the opportunity, I will use places I know as sets. There was one example where I was writing a work of interactive fiction, and I needed part of it was set in a school, and so I used the elementary school that I attended in the mid 90s, but the memories were stuff that I could just close my eyes and navigate through and relate all of that. And just being able to see that and have that experience of something that was actually real meant I had so much more spare brain space for building on it, rather than having to build everything in my head and then put it on the page. And in terms of place for writing, I am again one with the silence. I was never able to write in cafes even before the pandemic, though instrumental music does help a lot. Like something that's just calm and flowing helps to focus me. I think similar to the water.
Thank you so much. Shakoi, you were going to say something?
Yes, and similar to Phoebe, I love listening to instrumentals, specifically lo-fi music. For some reason, it gives like the vibe of someone walking somewhere anyways. So when I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, I think that this person would maybe walk there or go there. And when it comes to actually describing places in my writing, I find that kind of difficult at times. So I just cop out and think of very easy places. Like when I said in my piece, but we're in the grocery store, so I gotta force you to smile. Most people have been in the grocery store before, so I try to think of very familiar places, so it's just relatable for the listener.
Thank you so much. Michael, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think I'm the opposite. Part of that has to do with my journalism experience. I was a journalist for a long time. So what what I had to do when I was a journalist was that I had to go into work and work with words and put things together, and then come home and then switch over to my own writing. And a lot of people said, "Oh, it takes me 3-4 hours before I can wind down and get into the right space for that." But I found that maybe it's a matter of practice as well. Over the years, I could get right into it.
Thank you so much.
And now it doesn't noise, whatever, it doesn't really bother me that much. I'm in the middle of a family with 4 dogs, and the whole thing, everybody's going on, and I'm able, sit down, write a poem, and look outside. We're fortunate we live on a farm, so that's nice. But yeah, I mean, silence kind of scares me. I actually have to put my YouTube premium music on to sometimes, because I think But and in terms of the use of space and spaces in my writing, I tend to, as you saw from the poems, that I do use specific descriptions of whatever. Cottages and all the rest of it. But I believe that the writing process is the creation of a world, as opposed to the imitation of a world that's already out there. I believe that a writer has to, and this is part of the vision, has to create the world around them. Has to be able to, because even if you're Elmore Leonard, even if you're a mystery writer who writes very specific material, you're still creating that world. It's not really the world that's out there, that exists outside of us. And sometimes I worry about whether that world actually exists or not, but that's a different discussion, different argument. So, but I use specific places in my writing, but I think I try to, like I did in that first poem about the solitary walks at dusk. You try to go from a present day walk along a road at night at dusk, as the snow is starting to fall, to Tennyson's Lady of Shalott, and then to Marianne Moore's the writing about alligators and hippopotamuses, and then jumping across from there to where are we really? Oh, we're in a Martian tavern, and these three different entities are trying to have a discussion on what free will really means. So yeah, I tend to use spaces as something to create, as opposed to something that's out there already.
I love the Martian Tavern because I grew up on a lot of Spider Robinson. Anybody knows that? Any final? Yes.
This one is mostly for Shakoy, but anyone can answer it since it's relatively general. But you were reading a lot about personal experiences and personal feelings. So I'm wondering how you approach writing about those kinds of feelings when you do experience them, and then translating them into the writing process. Like, how long does it take from feeling those things to then writing about them? Is it a really long time? Is it a shorter amount of time? Is it in the moment? Is it hard to write about those kinds of things because it's so personal? I'm just curious about writing about personal things, I guess.
That's a great question. And I find that if I don't let it out, it might drown me keeping it inside. And so when I get the chance to actually say, okay, like this emotion, I don't really like the way you're feeling to me, so I need to actually put you somewhere else. And when I put you somewhere else, I'm going to talk to you, and by the end of this conversation, I'm going to be the winner. So really just like thinking of it as taking something off of myself. And one thing that I found with the emotion that I talk about, like grief, it can be such an ongoing thing. Sometimes you're so good, then there's one day when you're so down. And so I find that having the pieces to look back on remind me that, okay, I have actually taken the time to sit down and process this. And now I can go back to these things as opposed to always feeling the same continuously and like almost like hurting myself with the process. So I find that, and one thing that I love to say about my writing, usually I'm actually crying through my writing because I would say, you know what, it's either I get through this crying or I just keep it in forever. So I'd rather just get it out so I'm able to be like, okay, yes, you can see this happy person, but it brings me joy to show what I'm going through as well. So we can remember that just because you might look a certain way, you might be happy, doesn't mean that that's how you're feeling all the time. So I love to use it to inspire people to share their vulnerable emotions as well, to remind us all that we do feel down at times, and the more that we can connect on that, we can work on uplifting each other as like a community.
Thank you. Yeah, I really resonate with that. Did any of our other readers have answers to that? It's fine if you don't. Does anyone else have a question?
Thank you everyone for coming in and sharing your stories. My question was more about, I guess, editing or specifically finishing a story. I find in writing and a lot of stuff, I'm kind of perfectionist, always going back into things. So I wanted to ask about the process of coming to a poem or a story or a novel, and at what point do you feel like I can step away from it? At what point do you feel like it's finished? Do you ever feel like it's finished, etc.?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first if it's all right. Yeah, I think the editing, that type of editing process is really different when for a poem versus a short story versus a novel. I think for a poem, it's kind of a circular thing. You kind of start and you work your way through it, and then you kind of circle back to the beginning again. And you there might be a few couple of words that don't work, and you put those in, change something, then you put it away, and then you come back the next day and you look at it again, or you go for a walk, and then you say, okay, I think for now this poem is fine. When it comes to a short story, of course, it requires a lot more thought, and you have to put it together. You have to put, I mean, even if there isn't a plot, and the old O. Henry stories are no longer the kinds of stories that we write these days anyway. But I think that it has to hang together in some way or other. And that's one of the things that you work towards. If you read some of James Joyce's stories in The Dubliners, for example, you'll see it's almost perfection. It's like, okay, there's nothing more you can do to one of these stories that will make it any better. So, but you're not James Joyce, so you'll never reach that perfection. I mean, I will never reach that anyway. So at some point you have to say, okay, this is it. This is the story. This is it. A novel, I think, requires, like I edit a lot of novels and I evaluate a lot of novels, and it requires a process that goes from here to there, and you have to take in the narrative arc, you have to take in the plot line, you have to take in the point of view of the characters. Is it a first person, a third person? All those things you have to decide. And sometimes right at the end, just before, and I've done it, and I say, you know what? The main character in this novel, all I'm doing is bringing out that main character's thoughts and movements and actions. So why am I writing this in the third person? So, right there, you switch it over, and all of a sudden it works. Oh yeah, this is what I should have. This is it. It works now. But will it ever be the final? No. I mean, you give that to an editor at some point, that editor will rip it apart in many cases, and then come back with some other ideas and stuff. And you say, okay, I like those. I don't like those. Okay, let's move on. And then and then it gets published, and then somebody sends you an email saying, I found 10 typos in there. Oh, okay. So in other words, it's never finished. It's never ended. So different genres, different approaches to the editing process, and that's the way it should be. There's authors that I have to pull the stuff out of them because they keep on coming back and telling me that I can't. Every time you send me back an edited version, I rewrite almost the whole thing. Say, no, you have to stop at some point and say, okay, it's no longer mine. It now belongs to the public. It belongs to the people who want to read the story. And if you once that happens, then I think you feel better as a writer. But once in a while, you say, no, maybe I could have made that a little better. But let it go. Let it grow up. In other words, don't treat it like a baby for the rest of its life. So anyway.
Thanks, Michael. Anyone else?
Nobody else
Say one thing. I don't like editing. I feel like once I get it out, I'm like, okay, there it is. It's done. And I have to get really like, I have to tell myself like, you're the writer. Drop the pen. Like, have to have like those like almost Spider-Man where it's like, yeah, it's me. Like reminding yourself that you have the control. So eventually you have to just tell yourself, okay, this is the end of it. I'm done. I can walk away from it. And especially if you, one thing that I like to do to help is I'll write a bunch of like words that I want to involve in the poem. So once that poem is done, I know it's finished writing once I've involved all of those words. So kind of just remind myself that I've said all I need to say, and if I want to say more, I can eventually add that. But just being okay with just saying, okay, it's done, and walking from there.
Yeah, and for me, the way I approach it sometimes is I almost do the editing while I'm writing. It can make it a lot slower, but sometimes I will work through the structure in my head before I start writing so that I know where I'm aiming for in the first place. Like being in a big forest, but there being a mountain off in the distance, and it's like I have no idea what exact route I'm going to take to reach there, but that is my objective that I'm going to reach. And just if I go a little off a trail and I find it's not working, I'll just like back up, like maybe erase those words and just take another way. It does mean that it can take longer to get to a finish, but once I do get to the finish, I'm confident that it is finished.
You want me to jump in and say something?
Yeah.
Sure. No, it's interesting listening to everybody because I'm about to hand over my first novel manuscript to an editor, and who knows what's going to happen. But I do, what Phoebe's saying, I do edit as I write, but my first experience in having this collection of short stories published was the first time I went through that serious professional editing process where I had to hand over work that I had thought was done, more or less, and done my own editing for and whatnot, and then have all these other pairs of professional eyes. And as Michael very correctly said, now it's not mine anymore. Now this is going out into the public. Like you have to kind of cut those umbilical cords and oh my God, you want me to do what? And it can be emotional, right? But then you have to look at it. And of course you do have that choice to say yes, no. And then often it's strengthened by the advice that you're being given, and that they catch things that you never thought of or saw, which is great. But it's a process of, that letting go of, or the change that could happen, the transformation of the story that you might not have anticipated, all those kinds of things. So I guess I was sort of holding back from talking because I'm right at that stage right now where I'm about to hand over this massive amount of work. And allow other people to come in and provide their feedback.
Thank you so much. We have a little bit of time left, I think, to do the classic Brockton Writer Series end of event question, which is take a minute. We want you to think of one, ideally just one, book that you've read recently that you really recommend that people read. Doesn't necessarily need to have been published recently, just that you've read it recently. And ideally not, your 10 favorite books, because we are wrapping up here. But if you can think of one book you've read recently that you think everybody should read, we want to know what it is. You've guys got one, yes?
Yes, The Four Agreements by Don McCallum. Great self-help book. Really gives you like new agreements to live by, so we're not always getting tripped into self-sabotage type thoughts. So yes, The Four Agreements.
Thank you. We don't often have self-help books recommended, so I think that's really unique and fun for today. Camille, Phoebe, Michael.
Sure, I'll go. Jeffrey Escoffrey's If I Survive You. It was really popular. It made all the lists. He was shortlisted for the Booker and everything. And I saw this book and thought, wow, because oftentimes a popular book, it's not necessarily my cup of tea. His take, that first chapter that he did his take on race just had me howling with laughter. It was very well done. And the rest of the book was equally well done, I think, as well. So yeah, it's a good read.
This is going a little bit back. I just had to review my Excel sheet. But I would say for a novella, actually, and what can we offer you tonight by Primi Mohammed? It's so lush in description, just so like rich and warm with feeling, and it just uses language and builds things in ways I've very rarely seen, and it's just a very style of its own, and one that like has like awards juries have agreed, because like it's won some awards in the past couple of years, and it's just a very comforting and smoothly written book, and those are always very good when you find them.
Phoebe, do you keep a spreadsheet of everything that you read?
Yeah, I started in 2020.
I love that. That's incredible. Michael, what's your book rack?
Well, I wish I could say that I read a lot of books, because I don't. And one of the problems is that I've got more than 250 manuscripts to go through to select just a couple for Guernica. So that takes up all my time. So the books that affected me personally are books that were written in the 20th century and not in the 21st century. And in the early 20th century, actually, there's a toss-up between the trial and and I mentioned Joyce's Dubliners, the short stories before, and the one that stands out is The Dead, which is basically a novella more than a short story, and Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot. Those are the things that the writings that affected me. Like I say, I just don't have the time to read new material. I mean, I read new material all the time, but it's to evaluate. So I don't see, I see a lot of the postmodern material, and some of it is great, but none of it, in my opinion, has anything to compare to And maybe you know Virginia Woolf, you know, to the Lighthouse. That is also an incredible book. But they're all like, that's what's the expression? They all date me, as it were. So
Well,
but
I love that you didn't suggest a Guernica book. It's like you have thousands of children. You can't have a favorite.
well, that wouldn't be fair. We've published more than 650 titles in our history, and you know, there's been a whole bunch of great books, but it wouldn't be fair to mention one of those, because then the other 999 authors would get pissed off at me, and you know, they would. But there are, yeah, no, Guernica publishes a lot of diverse material. A lot of material started out with was created actually by our predecessor to publish Italian Canadian authors who were not being published at the time. And so we've kind of, my partner and I have really opened it up, and we publish a lot of diverse material, and you know, we're really proud of that fact. And you know, we're publishing, we're just finishing H. Nigel Thomas's Quartet, his fourth novel that's going to be coming out in 2026. You know, and we just finished George Eliot Clark's monstrous 6-volume epic Canticles. Canticles 1 to 3, 2 in each season, and there's 6 of them, and each one of those is about 650 to 700 pages. So yeah, we try.
All right, I'll block off a year to read that then. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Can I have one last round of applause for all of our wonderful, wonderful readers? Next Brockton is March 13th, 2024. Mark your Google calendars, mark your Outlook calendars. If you carry around a little paper agenda, mark that one. We'll be back here in person at Glad Day Bookshop and also on YouTube. So again, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then it'll probably notify you so you won't forget. We will hear readings from Alison Frost, Elizabeth Blair, Jennifer Alicia, and Denise DaCosta. And as always, we'll bring in an industry professional. Wait, don't we know the industry professional? Don't we have the industry professional in the audience tonight? We're going to be having the wonderful, amazing, hilarious Jessica Westhead talking to us as our guest speaker on March 13th, 2024. So put that in your calendars. Check out our 32auctions.com, bid on those items. Thank you, everybody. See you in March.